What if the very people that politicians claim are draining the U.S. economy are actually, well, the foundational pillars keeping it from just collapsing entirely?
It's a huge question and a really controversial one.
It is. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. We are jumping right into it today because we're unpacking a really fascinating piece of writing.
Yeah, we've got a lot of ground to cover.
We do. We are looking at John Novick Jr. It's an essay from his America Actually series, and it's titled Immigrants Make America.
Right.
And just to give you a brief summary of the thesis right out of the gate so you know where we're headed.
Wait on us.
This essay passionately insists that history, ethics, and actual data are vital to understanding and addressing the issue of immigration in America. And crucially, that it targets the Make America Great Again movement for shameful conduct and misleading the public.
Yeah, I mean, it is a sweeping argument. He's not holding back.
Not at all.
Novick is basically pulling together these deep historical threads, massive data sets, and, moral philosophy. He's trying to reframe an issue that usually just devolves into yelling matches.
Which, speaking of yelling matches, we need to pause here for a second. Because we are diving into a topic that generates so much of that shouting, we want to make our mission here incredibly clear to you, our listener.
Absolutely. This is important.
We are impartially reporting on the content provided in Novick's essay. We are not endorsing the viewpoints of the text, nor are we taking any political sides left or right.
Right. We are just the messengers here.
Exactly. Our role is just to act as your guides to understanding the arguments contained in this original source material. We just want to look at the genuine societal anxieties surrounding immigration and examine how Novick uses data to address them.
I think that's the perfect way to frame it, because the core tension of this deep dive, the real hook here, lies in taking the prevailing political narratives, right? Taking the very real fears people have about crime or taxes or scarce resources and stress testing them against hard data compiled by agencies like the FBI and the Census Bureau.
Right, not just rhetoric, but actual numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting where Novick starts, which is our collective memory.
Or a very flawed collective memory, according to him.
Exactly. He makes this really forceful argument connecting the past to the present. He claims that today's immigrants are fundamentally no different from the European ancestors who arrived over a century ago.
Yeah, Novick points out that Americans have a deeply romanticized view of early European immigration.
Oh, for sure. The whole huddled masses thing.
Exactly. We picture Ellis Island, people yearning to breathe free. But the historical reality of that era was, well, it was far less structured than we like to admit.
How so?
I mean, millions of white Europeans arrived in America with absolutely no passports, no visas.
Wow, no extensive background checks.
No, the vetting was incredibly minimal. Basically, if you arrived and didn't appear visibly sick, like with an infectious disease, your chances of being admitted into the country were incredibly high.
So by today's extremely strict, bureaucratic standards, millions of those early European immigrants would essentially be considered undocumented.
Yes, absolutely. They simply wouldn't be allowed in today because the system was fundamentally looser back then.
I mean, the great-grandparents of so many Americans today would not pass our current tests.
Not even close.
But I want to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
I call this the rose-colored rear-view mirror problem. Isn't there a massive contextual hole in that historical comparison?
How do you mean?
Well, back in the 1890s, the United States was a frontier nation. We literally needed bodies to build transcontinental railroads and settle these vast tracts of land.
Right, the infinite expansion mindset.
Exactly. But today, people look at their local communities and see tapped-out infrastructure. They see severe housing shortages, schools running at maximum capacity.
Yeah.
So how does Novick justify comparing a frontier economy to a fully developed 21st century nation?
That's a very fair critique, and it's honestly one of the core anxieties surrounding modern immigration. Novick's reconciliation of that difference, it relies on the idea that while the physical geography of the frontier has closed, the economic frontier has merely shifted.
Okay, an economic frontier.
Right. The human drive to move for survival remains exactly the same. But instead of settling farmland, modern immigrants are filling massive demographic and labor vacuums in our developed economy.
Which is something we'll get into heavily when we look at his data in a minute.
Yeah, we'll definitely get there. But before he even touches the economics, he addresses the moral disconnect. He argues that dehumanizing modern immigrants, especially when they are young, vulnerable, and black or brown, it lays a terrifyingly clear path for cruelty.
Yeah, he brings up Mother Cabrini in this section, which highlights a really profound philosophical tension in America.
She's the patron saint of immigrants, right?
Yeah, and America's first citizen saint. She died in 1917. It actually has a shrine in Chicago. But we are a nation that frequently claims these Judeo-Christian values, yet we often legislate with what Novick views as outright cruelty.
It's a huge contradiction.
It is. Mother Cabrini famously said that true charity towards God and towards your neighbor can never be separated from one another.
Exactly. Novick is directly targeting the hypocrisy of a society that, builds shrines to the patron saint of immigrants, but then criminalizes the exact same human migration today.
Right.
And this leads to his main historical conclusion regarding the anti-immigrant rhetoric we hear so frequently. He says there is no legitimate basis for demonizing immigrants. None.
So where does the rhetoric come from then?
He argues that unscrupulous demagogues manipulate the issue purely to seize power.
And he traces a very specific, terrible thread of this manipulation through American history, doesn't he?
He does. It's really eye-opening.
He moves from the anti-immigrant know-nothings of the 19th century who, feared Irish and German Catholics straight through the paranoia of McCarthyism and directly into the modern Make America Great Again movement.
Yeah, he frames it as this constantly recycled playbook. Politicians weaponize the fear of scarcity to consolidate their own power.
It's a psychological tactic.
A very effective one. If you can convince a population that outsiders are coming to take their limited resources, you pretty much guarantee their vote.
But Novick knows that modern anxiety isn't just about abstract history or, morality. It's driven by the wallet and personal safety.
Exactly. To truly challenge that playbook, he has to prove it wrong mechanically.
Right. He can't just preach. He has to bring the receipts.
And he definitely brings them.
He does. He pulls data from the FBI, the Census Bureau, Bloomberg, Pew Research, the U.S. Bureau of Labor, and UNICEF. So let's look at how his data addresses that huge fear that immigrants are draining the system.
Let's start with taxes, because this one usually shocks people.
Yeah, he cites that undocumented workers in America pay about $100 billion in taxes annually.
$100 billion with a B.
Now, to the average person, that sounds impossible. If you were off the books, undocumented, how on earth are you paying $100 billion into the system?
This is where understanding the actual mechanism is so important. Undocumented immigrants pay taxes in several highly structured ways. First, many use ITINs.
ITINs.
Yeah, individual taxpayer identification numbers. The IRS actually issues these specifically so that foreign nationals and undocumented workers can pay income taxes even if they don't have a social security number.
Wait, the IRS knows they don't have legal status, but issues a number just to collect the tax.
Pretty much. And people do this hoping it will count favorably if a path to citizenship ever opens up in the future.
So they are willingly paying federal income tax without receiving any federal benefits like Social Security or Medicare in return.
Precisely. It's taxation without the benefits. And beyond income tax, there is consumption and property.
Sales tax, basically.
Right. Every single time an undocumented worker buys groceries or clothes or gas, they are paying state and local sales taxes.
And what about property taxes?
Yeah.
Because they aren't usually buying houses.
True, they might not own homes at high rates, but they rent. And their landlords take those rent payments and pay local property taxes.
Which directly fund the public school systems and local municipalities.
Exactly. They are a massive, massive revenue stream.
Okay, well that significantly complicates the whole drain on the system narrative.
It shatters it, really.
But let's move to the other major anxiety, which is safety. You turn on the evening news, and you'd think we are living through this unprecedented crime wave driven by border crossings.
That is the dominant narrative on a lot of networks, yeah.
But Novick uses FBI data to show that immigrants are arrested for violent crimes at less than half the rate of the native-born population.
Less than half.
And even more surprisingly, and this one really caught my eye, the data suggests that when immigration goes up in an area, violent crime actually goes down.
It sounds so counterintuitive.
It really does. How is that counterintuitive fact actually happening on the ground?
Well, it comes down to basic human incentive structures. If you are an undocumented immigrant, your entire existence in the United States is predicated on staying completely invisible to law enforcement.
Right. Keep your head down.
Exactly. A broken taillight, a noise complaint, or getting into a bar fight isn't just a minor fine for them. It is a one-way ticket to deportation and potentially losing your family forever.
Wow.
That creates an incredibly strong deterrent against committing crimes.
So they have infinitely more to lose than a native-born citizen in the exact same scenario.
Exactly. And regarding the drop in crime rates when immigration increases, sociologists point to the revitalization of blighted areas.
How does that work?
Well, when immigrant communities move into decaying urban or rural areas, they tend to start small businesses. They repair homes, they increase local foot
Oh,
traffic.
I see.
Yeah, that localized economic revival structurally reduces crime because vibrant, populated neighborhoods naturally deter illicit activity. Eyes on the street, basically.
Here's where it gets really interesting, especially regarding the economy. We've talked about taxes and crime, but the labor force data is just staggering.
It's massive.
29 million foreign-born workers. That's almost 20% of the total U.S. labor force.
And Novick breaks down where they are situated too. While immigrants obviously hold roles in medicine, high-level engineering, corporate leadership.
Sure, to highly visible white-collar jobs.
Right. But he points out that about 8 million undocumented workers fill the absolute lowest wage, most physically demanding jobs in the entire country.
We are talking about agriculture, construction, food service, meat packing, day labor.
The grueling stuff.
Yeah. Let's upgrade a metaphor here. We often hear the U.S. economy described like a massive skyscraper.
Okay, I like this.
Political rhetoric frequently frames the undocumented workforce as a drain on the penthouse, right?
Okay.
Stealing resources from the top down.
Yeah, the idea that they're taking away from the success of the country.
But Novick's data suggests they aren't the penthouse. They are the concrete foundation of the building. And the reason they are the foundation isn't just because they are willing to work hard. It's because of a structural vacuum in the native-born population.
That vacuum is crucial to understand. Over the last few decades, the native-born American workforce has either aged out of physically grueling labor, or they have educated up into the service and knowledge economies.
Right. Native-born citizens largely aren't aspiring to pick fruit for 12 hours a day in the blazing sun without benefits.
No, they definitely aren't.
So those foundational jobs are nearly impossible to fill locally.
Right.
So if you pull 8 million undocumented workers out of agriculture and construction overnight, the skyscraper doesn't just get a little drafty. The concrete foundation crumbles.
Crops rot in the fields.
Exactly. Construction grinds to a halt. The cost of basic food and housing skyrockets for everyone living in the penthouse. The economy fundamentally relies on their labor to function.
Which is why the prevailing political stereotypes are so frustrating to economists. Novick spends a good portion of the essay completely dismantling our assumptions about who these immigrants actually are.
Like what?
Well, for instance, he points out that nearly 80% of immigrants are in the United States legally.
Wait, 80%.
80%.
That completely flies in the face of the narrative that we are experiencing this lawless, undocumented invasion.
It really does. And he dives into the demographics, too, which are fascinating. There are actually more female immigrants to America than male.
Really?
Yeah. And among those female immigrants who are 25 or older, more than 1/3 hold college degrees.
Okay, so why do we have this persistent image of the uneducated male laborer as the definitive face of immigration? If 1/3 of these women are highly educated, there is a massive disconnect there.
It's a bifurcated reality. We easily see the highly visible foundational labor, the construction crews, the agricultural workers.
Because they're working outside.
Exactly. But we often miss the invisible integration of immigrant women and men who are staffing our hospitals as nurses, working in tech, or running complex logistics.
It's not a monolith.
Not at all. It's a highly diverse influx of talent that gets completely flattened by political talking points.
And what about the sheer volume? The argument you hear constantly is that the numbers are unprecedented, that we simply cannot handle the sheer volume of people arriving.
Novick uses historical population context to address that anxiety directly. Today, immigrants make up roughly 14% of the total U.S. population.
Okay, 14%.
But historically, that percentage was actually higher in 1870, 1890, and 1910.
Wait, really?
Yes. Those are the very eras we romanticize with European migration. Proportionally, we have integrated a larger percentage of immigrants into our society in the past without collapsing.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, and I think this is where Novick's essay takes its most important turn, framing this as purely an American border issue means you are completely missing the forest for the trees.
Oh, absolutely. He zooms way out to look at the global crisis.
Right.
It is absolutely essential to look globally because the push factors driving this are undeniable. In 2023 alone, there were 110 million forcibly displaced people worldwide.
110 million.
Yeah. Driven by armed conflict, severe human rights violations, and increasingly climate-driven resource scarcity.
And the craziest part of that stat, among that staggering 110 million, there are almost 40 million children worldwide seeking refugee or asylum status.
40 million kids. It's heartbreaking.
It is. So for you, the listener, when you hear political debates focusing entirely on a wall or a specific U.S. border policy, Novik is arguing that you are ignoring a tectonic shift in human movement.
Yeah, the U.S. isn't uniquely targeted by some caravan.
No, we are just one of many developed nations navigating a global reality. Novik lists Germany, the UK, Spain, Canada, France, Italy, the Netherlands, Australia, and New Zealand. All these countries are processing massive numbers of refugees and asylum seekers.
It is a global phenomenon. Trying to isolate America from it is like trying to hold back the tide with a broom. It just doesn't work.
Which brings us directly to Novik's call to action, because we need to be very clear about his proposed solutions.
Right, because Novik is not arguing for open borders.
He's not.
No, he explicitly states that U.S. immigration policies and procedures have needed a major overhaul for decades. He is asking for a systemic mechanical fix.
Let's break down the mechanics of those fixes because they often just get listed as bullet points. He wants a secure border that honors the essential role of immigration. What does that actually look like in practice?
Mechanically, a secure, functioning border means expanding the actual infrastructure of processing.
So more personnel.
Yes. Hiring massive numbers of immigration judges and asylum officers so that a refugee's claim can be adjudicated in weeks rather than languishing in a multi-year backlog where people are just stuck in limbo.
That makes sense.
It also means creating orderly, sustainable pathways for temporary work visas that match those economic labor vacuums we talked about earlier.
He also calls for embracing dreamers as citizens, right?
Yes. He argues that stabilizes a huge demographic of tax-paying, educated young people who have basically never known another home.
So he's asking for a rational, functioning bureaucracy.
Exactly.
But he juxtaposes that rational reform against a very sharp, unforgiving critique of the current state of affairs. He specifically targets the actions of the 2026 Trump administration.
Yes, Novik's language here is incredibly pointed.
He directly calls out the administration's brutality. Specifically, how immigration and custom enforcement is utilized to sow fear in communities.
Yeah, he details how immigration and custom enforcement is actively separating Black and brown families.
Leaving children absolutely terrified that they will lose their parents forever.
And the most chilling part of his critique is the motive behind it.
Oh, yeah. This part was wild.
He makes a point to emphasize that this enforcement isn't happening because these people have committed violent crimes. It's happening simply because they live in sanctuary cities or in jurisdictions that politically reject the administration.
So it's essentially punishment.
He views it as localized, vindictive enforcement, yeah. And this goes back to the mechanism of crime we discussed earlier.
How so?
Well, when immigration and custom enforcement is deployed in this manner, it destroys systemic trust. If an undocumented person witnesses a violent crime or is a victim of domestic abuse, they will not call the local police if they believe it will result in their family being torn apart by federal agents.
That makes total sense. Terrorizing innocent people doesn't just hurt the immediate victims, it makes the entire community measurably less safe for everyone.
Exactly. It undermines socioeconomic stability. It destroys trust in the justice system.
And Novik warns about the ultimate cost of this kind of governance. He writes that cruelty and hate can do a lot of damage, but ultimately they are consumed in fires of their own making.
That's a powerful line.
It really is. It's a warning that leveraging xenophobia for political gain eventually burns down the very institutions that keep a country functioning. It severely damages America's standing and leverage on the world stage.
This raises an important question, perhaps the central question of Novik's entire thesis. How does a modern society balance the practical, mechanical need for an orderly border with the moral requirement to treat human beings with dignity?
It's the million-dollar question.
It is. And Novik is convinced that the current approach is failing on both fronts. It is neither orderly nor moral.
Right.
He reminds the reader that he believes the Make America Great Again movement is fundamentally motivated by xenophobia, racism, power, and greed, rather than any earnest desire to improve the nation or build a more perfect union.
So what does this all mean for us today? We have covered a tremendous amount of ground here.
We really have.
We've explored the cognitive dissonance between the romanticized European migration of the 1890s and the criminalization of the exact same human drive today.
We've looked at the underlying mechanics of the hard data, too, like undocumented workers paying $100 billion in taxes through ITINs and property rent.
And how their desire to remain invisible structurally lowers violent crime rates.
Right. We've also examined the skyscraper economy, how the aging native workforce has created a massive labor vacuum that only immigrant populations are physically positioned to fill.
And we zoomed out to the global reality of 110 million displaced people, recognizing that the United States is navigating a worldwide tectonic shift alongside every other developed nation.
It's all connected.
If we synthesize all of this for you, the listener, Novik's essay is essentially a demand for intellectual honesty,
Yes, a plea to look past the political theater.
past the manufactured fear,
Yeah.
and to examine the actual data, the historical context, and the ethics of how we treat our neighbors.
It is a demand to align our national actions with the facts on the ground. And, it leaves us with something critical to think about as we look toward the future.
What's that?
Well, it's well documented that aging nations like the US, Japan, and much of Western Europe are facing a demographic cliff.
Right, our populations are getting older.
Exactly. We don't have enough young people to support the tax base required for our aging populations.
The math just doesn't work.
It doesn't. So if the demographic data undeniably proves that immigration is the only mechanism capable of keeping these nations economically viable, will future generations look back at today's anti-immigrant rhetoric not just as a profound moral failure, but as a catastrophic economic miscalculation?
Wow, that is a deeply provocative thought to end on. If the moral argument doesn't move people, eventually the math catches up with everyone.
The math always catches up.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this unpacking of John Novick Jr.'s essay has given you a clearer, more mechanical view of the arguments and the data at the absolute center of this debate.
Keep digging into those numbers.
Absolutely. Keep exploring the sources, keep asking the hard questions about the narratives you hear, and we will catch you next time.